What is up, people? Van from the Vaniverse Gaming Channel here, bringing you another video. Today we're diving into the dark world of Neocore's game, King Arthur's Knight's Tale. Now, I spent some quality time in this game, and I'm excited to share my thoughts with you, so you can decide if this game is what you want to pick up in the future. So let's get started. First off, let's kind of talk about the visuals and the atmosphere. King Arthur Knight's Tale, it's a beautiful game for a top-down RPG, CRPG, whatever you want to call it. The game showcased some pretty good graphics, and it's in a very like dark world setting, which just adds to the intrigue of it. The character models are actually fairly detailed for this type of style game, and you can hear when there's some narratives and stuff going on. They do share some emotions, they do talk to each other, so it adds to just the emptiness of running around the map and doing stuff. So it's pretty cool how they have the visuals and the atmosphere kind of all tied together, and it really impacts the narrative of the story. And then each one of them, each knight or each character type has their own like unique armor and weaponry. So even the visuals of each character, it's not walking around with a bunch of the same looking characters, and that visual diversity is kind of nice in the game. And we talk about the environments of the game. It's very lush, and like the atmosphere, it's kind of haunting, but you can feel like the world feels alive. The battlefields are kind of eerie. There's some forests, there's some in dungeons, there's some outside worlds. It's pretty it all ties together to this dark theme that they're going for, and it all feels really fun when you're playing it, and really engaging, and really bringing you into the game. The lighting is also really cool, where there's a level of realism in the lighting on how some areas are lit up depending if you have torches or certain things, and you can see it especially during like the combat sequences of how far you can see and when enemies come into view, and that really adds to the combat because you may only see 3 enemies and all of a sudden 6 more come in because you couldn't see them, they're outside of your view distance. So just the attention to detail and some of the other designs, including Camelot, which is kind of like your main city, it just makes for a very cohesive and honestly visually striking game world. The the art style to me is very mature and gritty. You know, some games go for the cartoony-ish. I like the more mature and gritty art style on games, and so I think it complements just the whole dark theme of the game, and it just makes the whole game seem all tied together, like somebody put a lot of thought into everything and tying it all from a visual and an atmospheric perspective. And also the animations, right? So I feel like the animations are fluid. Like when you swing your weapon, they have good sounds that connect, and so even the combat, like you can hear the armor and the swinging and the hitting, and it really does a great job of just making everything feel real and tied together. So now we kind of talked a little bit about the visuals and the atmosphere. Let's get into the story and kind of what King Arthur Knight's Tale is. Now, forget what you know about the traditional Arthurian legend of King Arthur. This game embarks on a much more dark and pretty compelling narrative that diverges from that conventional tale. It kind of starts off with a shocking twist where you find yourself in the shoes of a guy named Sir Mordred, and they were a loyal knight who betrayed and murdered King Arthur, and then this lady decides to bring him back to life, and that's kind of how it goes. And there is a moral compass that's kind of going around. Like, your actions can change based on what decisions you make. And so you really don't have to be the good hero knight guy that you are in most, King Arthur kind of stuff. You could actually be a bad guy. So the morally gray nature and the choices, they add depth and realism to the characters, and they make them more relatable and the story more engaging. And the more you side with a specific type of, morale, I guess you'd say a morale chart, the more some of your companions will like you and others will hate you. And so it's pretty interesting on how you can develop that. It also kind of talks about, the theme of this story is about redemption and sacrifice and consequences of power. Most of the characters are knights who were resurrected. A lot of them are iconic figures from Arthurian lore, like Lancelot and Guinevere and some of these other ones. And the dialogue to me and the interactions is very well written. The storytelling with the dynamic decision making, I think it creates a narrative and a story that feels both personal and epic. And I feel like it sets it apart from a lot of these other CRPGs, tactical games that I have played. All right, now that we've kind of covered the visuals and the story, let's move on to the gameplay. And I think this is what makes, King Arthur Knight's Tale, this is where it truly shines. Now, this is a tactical RPG. I think they did a great job of executing this style of game, combining the turn-based combat with some strategic depth, planning your moves and the way that you set up your characters on this hexagonal grid. It's crucial because there's certain synergies and there's certain abilities that you do and the enemy does, and as you continue to play through it, they keep ramping up the difficulty. So as you progress, it's still more difficult, right? I do say that there are some things where it feels like it's easier than it should be, and other things where it feels kind of taxing on your characters. But if you play it on certain modes, like I think I played it through on regular mode, and I didn't really run into any issues. I think I didn't lose one guy the entire time until like the very, very end when the main story was over. And so it can be fairly easy if you're good at these types of tactical, RPGs. Now, it does set itself apart because I do feel like the gameplay is engaging. I like where, you're out of combat, you're walking around in combat, it's turn-based. But then there's also some very good, decision making that needs to be done with the area you're in. There might be some barrels that you can shoot. There might be some things to position behind so you can hide, similar to all these other tactical games. And it just, honestly, the combat is satisfying. And then when you talk about each knight, they all kind of possess something different in abilities, right? So each knight, you might have a tank who, he takes all the damage, like Sir Mordred, or you may have your archer, or you may have your spellcaster, or your healer. You may have your rogue class. So all of those different characters and building out your party, they make it very exciting because you have to some fights, you have to plan it carefully and think through, how you're going to set up those characters, because some are tanky, some are soft, some are ranged, and it really does make it challenging at most times. Now, the other thing that I would say is that when you do combine them together, there's some synergies that work, right? There's some AoEs that you can do, and there's some different combinations that work really well together. And when you can start figuring out how to build a party that can, work off of each other's abilities, it continues to make the gameplay fun. And when it gets stale, each character, you can swap them out for another character, and it just changes it a little bit, and it makes it a little bit more rewarding and not feel as so stagnant, a little bit more fresh. It's just sometimes it's difficult keeping a lot of characters leveled up. And the other last and probably most important one that I think is there's a timeline system that kind of allows you to plan your actions, taking into account the order the characters and enemies will act. This is very similar to a lot of these other games that you play, but it also introduces, kind of some strategic depth, because you can kind of figure out who's going when and how to handle it from a turn-based standpoint that will affect the battle. And lastly, like I said before, when I said I didn't lose anybody, there is a permadeath system in this game, like a lot of these tactical CRPGs. And so if you lose a knight, he's gone. He's gone for good. He's dead. There are some things later in the game where you can bring him back, but as your knights die, you lose them, and you can't have them the rest of the game. So there is some fear or some importance and emphasis on making careful decisions, because you might really, really like Sir Mordred, or you might really like Guinevere, or whatever, and they can die permanently, and then you got to start over with another champion. So just keep that in mind. It does make it feel a little bit better than some of these other games where your characters die and you just you just bring them back to life. So finally, I would say, all in all, this is probably, like I've said in many videos, my favorite part of King Arthur is the combat, right? How the combat plays, the different complexities of each character, which we'll get into in the next section, and how it all ties together to make it feel fun and rewarding. Okay, now that we've talked about combat a little bit, let's get into my second favorite part of all RPGs, and that's the character progression and customization. So King Arthur offers very many different classes, knights. And each knight has a group of different abilities they can do, and they can kind of go multiple different ways based on skill points. And even from knight to knight, if you have two knights that are both the same class, there is even some differentiation between those two knights that might lean you towards picking one versus the other. And then as you level up in the game, you gain points to then spend on all these characters' abilities, which you can have passive skills and you can unlock new skills. But then you can really lean into specific skills like fire-based skills or poison-based skills, or you want to be the best tank where literally you can just stand there and take no damage, or you want to be the healer, or you want to be able to push people back. I mean, there's endless possibilities from a character creation standpoint, and you feel like every couple missions you're getting enough experience points to level up those characters, and so it feels good. On top of the character customization, there's also some other things that you can get by adding in weapons and armor. So not only are you customizing the character's skills, but then you can find pieces of gear that just also work towards that. So if you want to go archer and you want to say, I'm fighting a whole bunch of undead and poison doesn't work, I want to build a fire archer for these types of combats. Then you can start finding bows and pieces of gear that might improve your fire damage abilities, might extend it or do more damage or hit another target. And then you can continue to build on from there. And it really makes it where you can have a very unique group of characters. And this is great because each character can then be used in multiple missions. The one thing which we'll get into in some of the cons is it's really hard to level up a bunch of characters because all the missions kind of level up with you. And so if you keep leveling up, at some point you're going to leave characters behind. Now they have a training ground, which we'll get into in a later section. It just doesn't really feel like it does the job that you need it to do, and you feel like you're kind of stuck with the same group of characters. Now, another thing that they do with character progression and customization is each knight has a morale system, and each decision you make as the player, as Sir Mordred, will then change how they react with you and whether they want to be part of your party. And this kind of leads to some fun dynamics within the game of the character interactions, and also with the fact that some of them just might leave your group. And so you can play the game through and say, I'm going to go all good and stay with the good characters. And then you can say, you know what, I'm going to play an evil playthrough, and then I'm going to just do all evil decisions and pick all the evil guys. And so it is kind of nice that you can have that customization of how you want to go, and then it adds for some replayability later on in the game. Now, the other thing that adds to this is there is a crafting system. And so not only can you buy items, not only can you get items within the game, but you can also craft items. And you can even disenchant items or destroy items to then use to buy other items. And so there is a very good system on how that works. And then in your town, you can actually increase the rates that these things will respawn and do some other things that we can get into here a little bit. But ultimately, when you look at the character progression, you look at the gear, you look at the different abilities that are allowed, and you look at the crafting system, this game is one of the best RPG aspects and character progression I've seen in a CRPG. And there's a lot going on, and so sometimes it can be overwhelming. But once you get it dialed in, it really makes for some really fun and exciting character building and RPG play that you don't see from a lot of these strategic combat type games. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the game. I think you have a good idea of the game. And now I just want to kind of talk about some of the pros and cons and get close to ending this video and then conclude. So the pros of this game, which depending on what type of player you are, I think the engaging story. I really did enjoy the story of it. I think it's engaging. I think bringing characters from a historical time is really cool to incorporate in the game. Another pro to me is the stunning visuals. I really like the graphics and the models and the atmosphere. It really plays together along with the audio where everything is very cohesive and it feels very immersive. I like the tactical depth, like bringing certain knights and how you can customize those knights and get them to fight. I really do like how some of the combat can be somewhat entertaining and difficult, and then you fight different types of creatures and all that, and so there's always different combat strategies, and they tend to get harder and harder as you go up. I do kind of like the dynamic decision making, right? Like, you make choices. Your choices affect how your characters play and how you level up and how the story goes, and that's really important. Another great thing is the base building. I like base building in most games. I really like the idea of figuring out which buildings to build up first and how to manage my materials. It's kind of like a mini game within the other game, and it just adds more depth and more flavor to the game itself. The other thing that I do like is it's challenging, right? The game is not easy. You can lose your characters, and it sucks. And some people are going to save scum that, but that's the part of the game, right? You want to make sure that you're playing it, and I like the challenge of it. There's a little bit of fear in every combat where you put a little bit more thought into it for fear that you're going to lose your guys. And the other thing that I really like is just the overall combination of the character progression, the character building, the gear, the RPG aspect of the game. And I think those are all what makes this game super great and fun to play. Now, for every pro, there is a con. And so there are things about this game that are things I really did not like. And I think other people might find that. First off, there really isn't a lot of learning curve on it, right? So like building your buildings and which buildings to build and all of that, it's kind of hard to understand. And you feel like you kind of pigeonhole your stuff sometimes. The other thing that I really don't like is that there are some bugs and some glitches where like the whole screen goes black or the game shuts down or just things that are really weird, or, you know, it doesn't fully show the map. So little bugs still exist in this game even though it's been out a while. The other thing that I don't really like is it's very mission-based. It's not exploration-based. I really hope that there would be more missions to choose from, or maybe have more of an open world feel so that you could go to areas and explore and then hit missions. Sometimes that whole procedural mission thing is kind of limiting in my opinion. The other thing is the repetition. I really do think that this game's main issue is the repetition. There's not that many enemy types, and there's not that many maps. And so basically you feel like you're playing the same thing over and over and over again. At some point, it just feels stale. I think they need to do more with maybe some outside other things, or maybe change the combat a little bit, something. And I know they tried to do this with their latest update. They created an update when you complete the campaign to make it more difficult. And I played through it, and it's fun, but it's still very repetitive. The other thing that I think can be a challenge is the UI. It's a little clunky. Navigation's kind of hard to like understand what direction you're going on the map, and there's some things with that. And ultimately, the lack of resources. That's probably the biggest one next to the repetitiveness is you don't feel like you can level up all the guys you want, right? You don't get a lot of XP. And sometimes the missions that you're doing as like your side missions, there's not enough of them that you feel like you can just grind them over and over again and continue to level up your characters. I wish that, you know, maybe the training ground, or there was a better way to keep certain characters leveling up that you're not playing. Because with the diversity of the characters, it's sad that like you have characters that you want to use and build out a specific way, but you feel like you just can never use them again. Like you got to pick the 5 you're stuck with, and you're stuck with them forever. So those are kind of the cons to the game. But overall, I mean, just to wrap it up, I really feel like Neocore and this game has delivered a very dark and mature take on the Arthurian legend. I really like the combination of the graphics, as well as the character creation, progression, and the tactical feel, the RPG. It really stands out to me as one of my more favorite tactical RPG games to play outside of the D&D setting, which I love so much. And I feel like if you like tactical RPGs, this is definitely a game you're probably going to want to check out. So that concludes our review of the King Arthur Knight's Tale. If you played the game, let me know in your comments if you think I'm off base. I love to answer comments that are left on my channel. If you liked the video, go ahead and subscribe, give it a little like, you know, all that stuff. And we'll see you in the next one. This is Van from the Vaniverse Gaming Channel. Cheers and peace out.